Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of 108 Stitches Baseball Talk. My name is Scott Morganrock, the Motor City Madmouth, and yes, here I am talking into the microphone as I always do, okay, here on the broadcast, and I'm welcomed here by Stuart Hack. Stuart, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing good, Scott. How about yourself?
I'm doing fine, thanks, and of course, the Monday guy who's our co-host, David Hodges. We introduce another tandem here, Hodges and Hack, the double H's. How you doing, David?
How you doing, guys? Glad to be on the show tonight.
Glad to have you. All right, well, let's talk about our sport of choice, and that is baseball. And we'll talk about the Houston Astros and the Oakland A's. Right now, the Oakland A's have actually defeated the Houston Astros by a score of 9-7. And that series, Houston now leads that series 2-1. The Oakland A's live to see another day. And what I call the Mike Fiers Bowl. Mike Fiers, for you folks that should know, blew the whistle on the Houston Astros, and that's when the Houston cheating scandal became infamous history for all the wrong reasons. So Stuart, what's your take on the Oakland A's Houston Astros series?
You know, it's another case, we discussed it earlier, of Oakland being a great regular season team, whether it's 162 games or 60, and then the playoffs come, and I don't know if it's that they're bad or Houston's battle tested. They didn't do great during the regular season, but they're battle tested. They're a veteran team, even when they're not cheating. So they have the experience in big games. So while on the surface it looks like an upset, maybe it really isn't that much of an upset.
David?
Yeah, I agree with Stuart on this one. Houston's been in, several big games over the past couple years, and obviously, yes, in those years was the cheating scandal. But when you go, cheating or not, you go into the postseason, through games like that. Of course, a lot of people say, well, they had an edge there, but it's still, the pressure of the postseason, the pressure of those games, and you can't bang on a trash can for that. That just has to be, that's got to be earned. It's got to be lived, and a team just has to go through that. So, but yeah, it's as we heard, Oakland just made it official. It's they're still down a game, and at least for their fans, they get one game in this series. But if Houston doesn't close it out in the next game, then at some point they will.
Yeah, I think the only thing I'll say is, even though Houston's 2 games under 529 and 31, and you have had Justin Verlander, they're an over 500 team, and I got to hand it to the managing job of Dusty Baker. I mean, there's a guy who's a stabilizing influence. To think he took over that job like he did under adverse circumstances like he did, and pretty much calm the ship. That's all he did, calm the ship, knowing that he's taking on a team here where they have a bullseye in their chest. And, but you guys are right. Houston's battle tested. They lost Garrett Cole. That was a big loss to the Yankees. And yet they're still, competitive with a lot of the experienced hands that they have in place. So, anyways, Oakland lives to see another day. You're right, guys. They're a regular season team, but they have yet to show any ability to go deep into the postseason for whatever reason. I don't know. I can tell you right now that Bob Melvin still is a heck of a manager. He really, really is. And does a good job with that franchise.
And it's interesting, Scott, you mentioned Dusty Baker, and Dusty Baker has always been known as a great regular season manager.
Right.
And has never really been able to go that far in the playoffs. So it's funny how he's managing against a team that has a history of that. And he's had a history. And this could be the year that maybe Dusty advances. And Houston beats Oakland and they face the Yankee Tampa Bay winner, then anything can happen. And maybe Houston ends up back in the World Series. And in this crazy season, do we see an under 500 team as the world champion?
If I recall correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, I believe Dusty Baker took the Giants to the World Series, but lost to it. I believe it was with the Angels.
Angels, yep. He lost to the Angels. Yep.
Well, not like he didn't get to the World Series. Problem is, he just didn't win it against Mike Scioscia. Although it didn't break my heart when Barry Bonds, didn't win a World Series, because of all the athletes I know out there, I really can't stomach them. Tell me how you really feel, Scott, okay? I hate Barry Fraud Bonds. I acknowledge Hank Aaron as the all-time home run king. I don't think a lot of people will disagree with me there. Topic for another day. But yes, I wish Dusty Baker real well. Another manager that I probably wish pretty well too It's Cleveland Indians manager Terry Francona. He thought about retiring after surgeries for blood clotting. Are the Cleveland Indians relevant without Francona? Because Sandy Alomar was taking over the club. And, let's not kid yourself. Terry Francona is the guy that was managed the Boston Red Sox and broke that long drought. Who wants to take the lead on this one?
I'll take this one. I don't, personally, I don't think that the Indians are irrelevant without Terry Francona. I mean, yeah, he's definitely made his name in the managerial circles in professional baseball over the last 20 years, and he's a great manager. The Indians were lucky to have him, lucky to get him, as any club would be. Obviously, as you just mentioned, when you take a club that's gone 86 years without a World Series championship, and you bring it to them, then that's just going to put you on an absolute another level. That if you're looking for work, you really, it's almost case you're not looking for work. Teams are looking for you when they decide to go in a different direction from their past managers. And I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't he the manager of the Birmingham Barons when Michael Jordan Michael Jordan was in the 90s? Because I know there was even a documentary, I believe it said it was Jordan Rides the Bus.
Yep.
And I was amazed when I saw that Terry Francona was his manager. So yeah, I mean, and that's a great story right there. But Cleveland's got a lot of talent. They do. Of course, he's taken them to the World Series. Of course, they were to lose it in 2016 to the Cubs. I don't think the Indians would be irrelevant. That's obviously a very proud baseball franchise. I think they would go out and get another big name. And of course, if Terry Francona chooses to retire, then yes, we wish him all the best. But in answer to your question, no, I don't think they become irrelevant without Terry Francona.
Well, he goes to the Hall of Fame as a manager at least, and of course, don't forget the fact that he did a pretty good job with the Philadelphia Phillies too. Stuart, what's your take on this?
I agree with Dave. I think Terry Francona probably will not come back next year. I just think the health issues will be too much, and I just don't see him coming back. Let's give Sandy Alomar a chance. I mean, he's a good baseball mind, comes from a good baseball family. Cleveland will have a lot of other questions coming up on the field as far as player personnel moves coming in next year. They're going to be relevant regardless of who manages. But, my feeling is if Terry Francona doesn't come back, give Sandy Alomar a chance to manage the team. It's not like he's a total unknown. He has coaching experience. He was a player. He was a catcher. They make good managers.
Oh, yeah.
Give him a chance. And I think Cleveland is still a playoff team, still a contender for a World Series next year.
Fair enough. I mean, again, Terry Francona, to me, if he doesn't manage another day in his life, what he's accomplished, not only as a manager, but as a player. And I had a good fortune of interviewing Terry Francona many years ago here in South Florida. I believe he was with the Expos at the time, and they were playing the Texas Rangers at the old Pompano Beach Municipal Stadium. And Terry's a really good guy. He really is. And the success that he's had, and he comes from a good baseball family in his own right. So I agree. I hope he retires for his own sake. There comes a point where health does take – you have to focus on your health, and he's done everything he needs to do. As a World Series championship with the Red Sox, and he took the Indians to the World Series. I mean, you can't do much better than that except maybe win that World Series with Cleveland. I mean, we talked about it on Monday night's broadcast how Theo Epstein broke 2 droughts. He broke the one in Boston, and then he ended up breaking one in Chicago. Terry Francona nearly matched that with the Indians as well as the Red Sox. So pretty interesting comparison. All right, let's talk about the Miami Marlins. Starling Marte is out of the NLDS. Don Mattingly mentioned in our call the other day he had to take it, that Marte was not able to fulfill the things that he needed to do to become a factor in the series. And so it's an issue. But now I know that Marte's leadership is missed, but now Miami finds himself down 2-0 to the Atlanta Braves. They lost 2-0. Pablo Lopez was, pitched 5 quality innings, only gave a couple runs, and the Marlins bats were silent. So, when during our call today, Don Mattingly said that the Miami Marlins have played well against Atlanta. They're getting there, but every team has to go through certain challenges. And I love the way he talked about the Marlins situation is you compare it to the Chicago Bulls versus the Detroit Pistons. That you have to get past these guys to take the next step. I'll even take it a step further when the Pistons had to deal through the Boston Celtics until they became a champion. So I think the Miami Marlins are going through this. It's certainly been a great Cinderella story with what they've done. But, let's talk about the Marlins. I don't know how many more days we have to talk about them. I hope that they're able to win tomorrow, but they have themselves a bit of a hole right now. So, Stuart, we've talked about this situation. We've been close all year. What's your take on the Miami Marlins? You think they've got to win it with them over at Minute Maid Park?
I think what you have to look at, today is October 7th. If someone said on March 7th the Miami Marlins would be in the National League Division Series, you'd sign up for that, right? You'd like, holy cow, I definitely sign up for that. So now that they're there, I know this was a weird season. These guys, even if they get swept by Atlanta, nothing to be ashamed about. In addition, the younger players get battle tested. We talked about that, how Houston became successful. Those guys are battle tested. The Marlins get a bonus this year. They get a little big game experience that maybe if this season was 162 games, maybe they're not a playoff team if things were normal. But they are, and they take this momentum going into 2021 where we hope is a 162 game season. And then you see a really improved team and a team that honestly has a chance, maybe with the exception of the Dodgers, maybe the Padres be the third best team in the National League next year.
And they get Sixto Sanchez tomorrow. Their young pitcher that we talked about, David, who was along with George Alfaro for JT Real Muto. So he'll be on the hill tomorrow for the Marlins. So, well, let's talk about the Marlins ride, Dave. What do you got to say?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Stuart. It's definitely been, it's been a great season for them. Even though it is a pandemic-shortened season, but yes, like we talked about the other night, the Marlins, as you said, they have nothing. Stuart said, they have nothing to be ashamed of. It's a very young core of players. They got the great Don Mattingly, at the helm for many years to come. And as I mentioned the other night, Marlins fans, they've, even if they already get swept by the Braves, they've got a lot to look forward to. They've got many years. Obviously, with Don Mattingly at the helm, this team is only going to get better. This is not a fluke where they just happen to hit their stride and all the other teams got unlucky. This team is for real. And again, obviously, they might bow out of the playoffs. Hopefully they can come back, tie the series, possibly even win it. But as you said, they got quite a hole to dig themselves out of. But as a baseball fan, once COVID-19 gets over with and we get back to full season fans in the stands, I think you're going to see a rejuvenation down there in South Florida with the Marlins.
Yeah, I think what's interesting about the Marlins, though, when you look at them, is think about the playoff experience and the pennant type of feeling that these kids have acquired in this short period of time, and everything that this organization has gone through. They play for each other. They love each other. They communicate. They're like a brother, a bunch of brothers in that clubhouse, and they're a product of their manager, Don Mattingly, the most even-keeled guy on the planet. He really is. And what they're trying to do is they've got something here which is all designed for sustainability. So, there's no question that the future looks good for the Miami Marlins. So we'll see whether they can get their first win. But Sixto Sanchez is a stud, this kid, and it'll be up to him to keep the fish afloat at least tomorrow over at Minute Maid Park. We've talked about the Miami series. We'll talk about Houston and Oakland, and anything else that you want to add about the Houston and Oakland series, Stuart?
No, I think, if Oakland can win game 4 in a best of 5, I wouldn't rule them out for this series. There's momentum that they would have coming in, but you take it one game at a time, the cliche, and, we'll see what happens. Whoever wins that series would probably go in as an underdog against the Yankees and the Rays,
right?
Whoever gets out of that series. But, again, the Astros are battle tested. Oakland's a solid team. The one thing that I think is good with what we're seeing in the final 8 is there really no flukes per se. Maybe the Marlins were the closest that no one really thought had a shot, but they've proven to be a solid team.
Right.
But you think about it, the Dodgers we're favored in the beginning of the year to come out of the National League, and that hasn't changed. You know, Tampa Bay, the Yankees were two solid teams for the American League. That hasn't changed. You know, Minnesota was a good team. You know, they was playoff teams. That has, you know, those teams were good. So you didn't see any fluke teams come out of this. And that was the biggest concern I think a lot of people had going into a 60-game schedule, that you might see. I think we even discussed it on an earlier show. What would happen if the Kansas City Royals played the Miami Marlins in the World Series?
Right.
You know, what do it? You know, the people who were doing marketing for MLB would really have to work overtime. The way it is now, you know, likely it won't. You're going to get to the two best teams, I think, the teams that everyone thought. So that makes whoever the world champion is more realistic.
Well, of the elite 8 that you have there and the 4 games, they're all divisional opponents too. So it's not like there's no familiarity factor with them. Miami and Atlanta, they've seen each other a lot. Houston and Oakland, there's no love lost between those two. That's for sure. They simply hate each other. And you want to talk about other teams that hate each other? How about the Tampa Bay Rays and the New York Yankees? Let me give you scores of these games first. The New York Yankees took no prisoners in Game 1, beating the Rays 9-3, and Tampa came back in Game 2, winning a 7-5 game. Tonight at 7:10 Eastern Time, should be getting started any moment.
There's no score after 1.
What was that? Okay, so no score at the end of 1. You heard it from Mr. Hack here, keeping us up to date. But for Tampa Bay, Charlie Morton, who actually played for the Houston Astros, and you got Masahiro Tanaka on the hill for the Yankees. So we knew all along that this Tampa Bay New York Yankees series is going to be as Donnybrook, and it potentially could be with these two teams, let alone the fact that you have the roots of the Yankees having their headquarters in the Tampa area in Rays territory. So, you know, I guess during a normal season, you know, I guess the Tampa Bay Rays should be thankful that the Yankees come down often, because those are their biggest crowds, because they can't draw anywhere in that place called Tropicana Field, which should really be bulldoze bound, and it might be after 2027. So, but Stuart, what's your take on the Tampa Bay Rays New York Yankees series?
You know, one thing we forget, you know, we talk about home field advantage. Right now, everyone's in a bubble. They're playing in neutral fields, no fans. I don't know. I'm out on the field. You know, I didn't get past Little League. So the intensity of playing in a big game maybe is taken back a little bit by the fact that there are no fans in the stands. Sometimes you have piped in crowd noise. But yeah, Tampa Bay and the Yankees, it is a rivalry. And they don't like each other. And that alone, and I think that helps baseball when you have those two teams. And as you mentioned, Scott, Oakland and Houston hate each other. You know, the Padres and Dodgers, I think, are a future rivalry. The Padres are an up-and-coming team, so that's a nice battle. And Atlanta and the Marlins, they could be, you know, reigning for the National League East supremacy for the next few years. So we're seeing either great rivalries now or the start of what could be a great rivalry. So even though there are no fans per se, that hopefully there is some intensity going on in these games. And it'll be exciting to see when we get to the championship series, how that plays out, and the World Series, you know, how that'll play out. And it'll be interesting going forward for baseball, how certain things like neutral fields, how certain other rule changes this year, the universal DH,
Right,
7-inning doubleheaders, the guy on second in extra innings, all these new rules, if any of them stick based on this season. And it's funny because my impression when all these rules were introduced, it's like, you know, it's not going to happen after this. It's just they're just doing it for this year and that's it. But you think about it, I can see, especially the DH. I don't know if we're ever going to see a pitcher hit on a regular basis in the National League again. I think they're going to go to the DH next year and stay that way.
Yeah, when we talk about the Rays and the Yankees, so you have the underspenders versus the overspenders, and obviously the underspenders are, you know what, they may be setting the table for how this game should be. It's not how much you spend, it's how wisely you spend it in development. So, and of course and we've talked about San Diego and the Dodgers. That's becoming a very interesting rivalry between those two Southern California teams as well, separated by about a couple of hours away. as we alluded to on Monday's broadcast, a lot of the San Diego teams migrate to LA at some point or another. If you want an example, the San Diego Clippers became the LA Clippers. And why not just say that the San Diego Chargers went to Los Angeles, became the LA Chargers? So, but again, and the Dodgers lead that series 1-0. Of course, the Yankees and Rays are tied at 1 on the hill tonight. Zach Davies for San Diego, and the LA Dodgers will send Clayton Kershaw. So, David, some thoughts?
Well, especially starting off with the Dodgers, obviously Clayton Kershaw went off in his last start. I believe he had 13 strikeouts. I believe it was a couple days ago. Yeah, I mean, really, who better to have on the hill? If you're the LA Dodgers, than Clayton Kershaw. But yeah, it's in a pandemic shortened season, a lot of these close teams, if I could say it, or as you put it, divisional opponents. I kind of think it's good for the game a little bit. It definitely adds that flair of rivalry. Really, it's the best way I can put it. And obviously, Tampa is a big rival of the Yankees, also of the Red Sox. So that's a team. Of course, they're both AL East. Obviously, of course, all baseball purists know the hatred of between the Yankees and the Red Sox. And well, now it's almost like you kind of have those two in a circle, but right outside the circle is now the Tampa Bay Rays, and it just takes one good series obviously for either team to make it where they don't say like, well, they're kind of these are our main rivals, but this is kind of like our little brother rival, so to speak. I kind of almost want to liken it to the Carolina Duke rivalry here. And I can't remember which Tar Heel said it, but it was I believe it was a few years ago, where he said, we don't consider NC State a rival. That's just another team 20 some miles away. Their rival is Duke. And whereas a lot of Yankees fans would say, well, no, our rival is the Red Sox, period, underline, exclamation point. But I see the Rays. This could be for many years to come. These teams. Again, when fans get back in the stands, when it becomes a full season, these teams could really go down to the wire, in the regular season, and one could dethrone the other, and that just adds another, I guess a feather in the cap, for whatever team say, okay, oh, you're a rival, okay, well, how many times have we knocked you out of the playoffs, or how long, how many years have we kept you out of the playoffs? And so I do feel that it is good for this postseason. To have these rivals going at it head to head in these series.
Now, if the baseball gods get their way, you got the Yankees and the Dodgers. However, okay, and that's what everybody's anticipating. I predicted that matchup, and of course, and then in a fantasy world, you wonder if the Dodgers will win it because they won it in '81 during the strike-shortened season. Tom Lasorda became a world champion. Now, there's perception and reality. If the Rays take on the Dodgers, okay, in the World Series, Andrew Friedman, the guy who was the architect of the Tampa Bay Rays, is now in LA with that boatload of cash, versus the Rays, who are finding a way to be competitive. Then you have a couple of interesting storylines that can develop from within, assuming that the Astros ultimately get knocked out and that they went as far as they could, but cooler heads and common sense prevail. Now, Stuart, you brought up some interesting points about what rules should stay. Here's my gut feeling, is that the designated hitter will probably stay. The three hitter rule, I believe, is obviously permanent.
That ends regardless this year.
What's that?
You mean the three batter?
Yeah, did I say the three hitter rule? What did I say?
Yeah, I think you said the 3-inning rule, but the 3-batter rule.
Right, that's what I meant. Okay, the 3-batter rule is permanent.
But I think that effect this year, regardless of how many games they were going to
Well,
play.
no, that's permanent. The 3-batter rule is permanent.
Yeah.
And you know what? I've grown to like that one a little bit. If for no other reason, okay, relief pitchers used to go a couple of innings anyway. So what's 3 hitters? Of all the ones that you have, the 3-hitter rule, that was the one I could tolerate the most, even though I don't like the rule per se, because I like the matchup changes. But, in baseball, you acclimate to certain things. Now, the extra inning rule where you have the man on second, gone. That was definitely a 1 year, one and done. Okay. I don't see that. The 7-inning doubleheaders, that didn't going to happen over the course of 162. They had to protect the arms, and that's what they had to do. As far as the pitch clock, I don't ever see that one ever making it to the major leagues either. Again, you always use the minor leagues as a testing ground for these. So the only two that really I think will stick right now, Stu and Dave, is a 3-batter minimum. I believe that's there, and the universal DH, which is inevitable. If it isn't next year, it'll happen within 2 years. And Don Mattingly said he had no problem with it. Of course, he grew up with it with the Yankees anyhow. So, Stuart, I've been talking to David and Rick Curdy about this. So I want your opinion about the Detroit Tigers looking at A.J. Hinch and Alex Cora as a potential managerial candidate. Do you think that's too soon for these guys to get back in the game? Or do you think that after 1 year that, they deserve a second chance?
I guess in the case of Hinch, supposedly he had nothing to do with the actual cheating. He may have been aware of it and just wasn't able to control it. Cora, I hear, could be a candidate to end up back in Boston.
I heard that too. Yeah.
And that I don't think I think the Red Sox felt they had to do something as far as discipline to officially fire him, even though, he was suspended for the year.
Right.
But he won a world championship with them. He was well liked with the players and the fans. So in his case, I see him coming back to Boston. Hinch, yeah, he can end up in Detroit. You know what the thing is, Scott and Dave? These guys were popular. They were well liked by players, management, and writers. They talked to it. Carlos Beltran, on the other hand, maybe wasn't always that friendly with the writers. I don't see him getting a job so quickly. And, the Met job would have been his first job, but I don't see him getting something back. The other two, yeah, I could see them managing next year. And, is it too soon? Probably not. You think about it this year, that Houston story became a non-issue because of the 60-game pandemic season. Right. Maybe if it was a 162-game schedule and there were reminders throughout the year of what was happening, yeah, maybe those two guys don't get a job right away. But with the way everything happened, there's a need in Detroit. There's a need in Boston. I think the fan base in Boston would be thrilled with Cora. I think the fan base in Detroit would be good with Hinch.
I do too. I really do. For some crazy reason, I like it. I think the one thing Alex Cora has going for him, of course, being I believe a Latino descent, is that correct? Then he can go ahead and relate to a lot of the international players as well. But you're right, he was pretty popular in Boston. So are there any other managerial ideas that you guys may have for some of the openings that are out there?
You know what? It potentially could be an opening.
Where?
The Dodgers. And I want you to think about this before you have me committed.
Sure.
So Dave Roberts, has come up short in some World Series and some playoff series. And he had a lot of expectations coming into this season. Now, I know they only played 60 games, but who had the best record in baseball for those 60 games? The Dodgers. So who was expected to get to the World Series and perhaps and win it? Not just get there. He's done that already. He's gotten there, but he hasn't won it. So if the Dodgers fail once again to win a World Series, I can see potentially them looking to make a change there.
Well, then I'm putting you on the show with Rick Curdy because he's been drinking the Dodgers fire Dave Roberts Kool-Aid for a while, hasn't he, David? How many times?
He really has, yeah. Yeah, and, that's, kind of how it is across all sports. Whenever, a head coach gets appointed, obviously, what is the bar? To get to the championship, to the World Series, the Super Bowl, Stanley Cup, NBA Finals, and not just get there, but to win it. Going back, to the question about, Alex Cora and AJ Hinch, these guys, are, like management or coaching, and something like that went on. To me, that's just going to kind of permanently scar the legacy. And might make, the higher ups of any club saying, or, board of directors going to the meeting and say, okay, well, we need a manager of the, someone says, okay, well, what about AJ Hinch? They're like, see that trash can, go hit it 3 times. And, To me, that's just, it's almost lack of institutional control, to kind of pull that cliche out of college. I know that's, apply more to college coaches, when, a lot of them will get let go. Do I think they'll get another chance? Yes. And of course, as Stuart said, it's obviously been a pandemic shortened season. Players have come up positive, and it's been more overshadowed. The scandal, of course, but it's always going to be in the back of the fans' minds, management's minds. When time comes to hire a new manager, I think they get a second chance. I mean, maybe not after a year. I'd say possibly 2 or 3. Then, maybe their phones start ringing again. But I mean, that's my take on the two of them. Obviously, you, myself, and Rick. We'd all talked about how Boston was just a tire fire of of a team this year. We all knew Ron Renicky would not be back. He was just basically he was just Band-Aid on a surgical opening. It's not gonna do much. But I think they get a second chance. And I'm with Stuart on this one. The Dodgers don't get to or don't win the World Series this year. I think Dave Roberts he needs to do what he can to pad his resume when able to get back to the winter meetings and start in job interviews.
And wouldn't it be funny if the Dodgers let him go and then hired A.J. Hinch?
Oh, that's interesting. Oh my God.
I don't see how that's something that could happen. I mean, that's just,
I don't know. I don't.
Okay, you stole the hardware from us.
Remember though, a lot of the fault of the bad guys in this are the players.
Right.
Hinch was just someone who couldn't control them. It wasn't necessarily he was a bad manager. If the Dodgers think that he'd be the best, obviously the star players would have to be on board with this. If a Kershaw or one of the players, or Mookie Betts said we don't want it, and I can't see Mookie Betts saying that because he was part of the 18 Red Sox. If star players aren't on board with this, then I could see it wouldn't happen. But if they come and say, we think Hinch is the best for it, or even Cora, because there's a Red Sox.
I was about to say Cora. Cora might have more appeal toward Betts than Hinch. You just took the words right out of my mouth. That Cora might have more appeal toward, and don't forget David Price is coming back next year too. So you have a little bit of a Red Sox reunion out in L.A. But I was just thinking the same exact thing. So I don't know. I mean. You talk about Hinch to the Dodgers, to me, right when you think things are off the wall and crazy, you never know what could ever happen in this game, especially when teams are desperate and they're trying to win. I mean, I never thought in a million years Joe Madden would wind up being a Cubs manager, although at some point I thought he would end up being the Angels manager down the road, but he ended up pairing up with Theo Epstein, and we all know how that turned out. So, that's pretty interesting stuff. So, I don't know. I mean, so, now that we have a Mets guy here on this broadcast, Mr. Hack, okay, I believe you have an ownership situation, okay, that should settle itself in the next month or two with Stephen Cohen. Why don't you give us a little bit of a background on how much the Mets would welcome the leadership of Stephen Cohen?
Well, okay, so to go back, in 1980, the Mets were bought by Nelson Doubleday and Fred Wilpon. They co-owned the team probably for about 20 years, I want to say, and then Wilpon bought out Doubleday's interest. There was always a conflict between the two of them. Doubleday was more of a spender, Wilpon not so much. It came to fruition in 98 when the Mets got Mike Piazza, which was totally a Doubleday move. Wilpon did not want to acquire Mike Piazza, and we saw how that ended up turning out.
Right.
So once Doubleday was out of the picture, Fred Wilpon became the main majority owner. His son, Jeff, was managing the day-to-day stuff. The Mets were not spending, especially when you have a team across town that was spending. They had some good years where they made the World Series, but there was no championship since 1986. Earlier this year, it kind of came out of left field that the Wilpons were considering selling it. And Steve Cohen actually had agreed to buy the team, but there were some issues and the deal fell through. So they picked it up again now, and apparently they were able to agree on a price. Cohen will come in, hopefully, this off season, and he has money. So he has money to spend. So that means at least Met fans, for the first time, any major free agent is a possibility to come there. So there is some excitement that things are going to change for the Mets. Although, obviously a big name free agent is never a guarantee of a World Series championship, but it does give the fan base a cause for optimism, which they haven't had in a while.
Let me give you an interesting Wilpon story. When I was covering the Fort Lauderdale Yankees many years ago, a lot of years ago, a kid by the name of Todd Wilpon was there. I think he was obviously related, member of the family, and the late PA announcer, Doug Pett, because Wilpon got so obnoxious, kicked him right out of the press box. Not that was surprising anyhow. I remember Todd getting kicked out of there. But when you also look at the fact that the Wilpons were involved with that Ponzi scheme, that certainly was not a good look there in New York either, was it? Knowing full well that, how could you get sucked into a Ponzi scheme like that? So it seems like Stephen Cohen has a lot of work to do on a lot of different fronts, but once he gets his hands on it, you can only hope that he'll be able to infuse a lot of good energy. The only thing I guess you could say the Mets have going for him is they ripped down Shea Stadium, never been there, and they have that brand new ballpark. So,
okay, so a couple of things there. So, Shea Stadium was a dump, but if you grew up as a Met fan in the 60s and 70s like I did, it was my dump. And the issue with Citi Field is because the Wilpons team, when they built it, it was built in the model of Ebbets Field.
Right.
Which is fine if this was a Dodger team. But when you have certain things like the Jackie Robinson Rotunda getting put there before anything Tom Seaver, you have some history with the Mets that they initially totally ignored. Everything was Dodgers. Yeah, we know Fred Wilpon played high school ball with Sandy Koufax. That's great. But he owns the Mets. And there should be some thing with the Mets there. And, the Tom Seaver way and the statue is a start. But that was an issue that I had. I realized they did need a new stadium. Shea was falling apart. And I've been to Citi Field. And, it's nice, but it just doesn't, to me, have like a baseball field feel to it, if you can understand that. It's just very, I don't know. For me, if you ask somebody who's younger, maybe they have a different view of that.
Right.
But for me, if someone told me Shea Stadium would be up tomorrow and you had a choice between Shea Stadium and Citi Field, give me Shea Stadium.
Well, what do you expect? You grew up with the stadium, for crying out loud. So I can appreciate it. I grew up at Tiger Stadium, and I hated to see it go, the Comerica, but they're not ripping down. Citi Field. I mean, but I think that once Steve Cohen gets his hands on there, I wouldn't be surprised if there indeed is a lot more Mets paraphernalia, and he'll make it a cozy place.
And Steve Cohen is a lifelong Met fan, I might add. So that's something that helps as well.
Sure. If you're a lifelong fan, you appreciate the history of any team, I would think.
Right. So it's not someone who it's not like Steve Cohen, buying San Diego,
right.
Just an investment. He's buying the team that he rooted for as a child.
Hey, nothing wrong with that. It's just with him, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when he gets a ball club. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people in New York are glad that Alex Rodriguez and his fiancee, girlfriend, or whoever didn't get it. Otherwise, that would have been a circus waiting to happen. You want to make sure that Steve Cohen does get it, because when he gets his hands on it, then you can only hope that he has a Steve Ballmer effect, a guy with a lot of money, a lot of charisma. I don't know how much charisma Cohen has, I got to assume, but I know Steve Ballmer of the Clippers does have a lot of that going for him. And I only wish the Mets well. And I can tell you right now, whether I'm a Mets guy or not, through my years of covering the Mets up in Port St. Lucie, they've always treated me really well. I think one of the nicest people I've ever dealt with over the years is Jay Horowitz. He's one of the nicest PR people you'll ever know. I don't know if you ever know him, but Jay Horowitz, to me, is one of the best PR guy I've ever worked with. And there you go. There you go. Jay Horowitz, he knows. What am I talking about Jay Horowitz for? But have you ever met Jay Horowitz at all?
I have not.
Well,
You know,
I'll tell you what, Jay Horowitz to me is one of the nicest people you'll ever meet. And I could preface that by saying that Lee Remmel, the Green Bay Packers, is in the has a lot to me, reminds me of Jay Horowitz, two classy PR guys whose names are all over those respective franchises. So I've worked with Jay, one of the nicer guys, and the Mets have treated me real well. I have no complaints, even though I've been a Detroit writer for my whole life. Every time I put in a request there, for the most part, I've really never had a problem with the Mets. So I have no problem with the Mets, the Yankees, even though I'm a Tigers guy and now also a Marlins guy. So, all in all, I think we had a pretty good broadcast tonight. We'll certainly gauge the playoffs and we'll see what's going on. I'd be curious to see what we have going on for next week. David Hodges does this on Monday with Rick Curdy. Stuart Hack and I do the Sports Exchange, and we also do 108 Stitches Baseball Talk. Then again, all my team here, if you guys are not interchangeable parts, I'm in deep trouble. And you guys are. I have no problem. I love everything that you guys bring to the broadcast. So with that said, any closing thoughts from you guys before you guys tell everybody where you stand for?
Why don't we make a prediction? Who's going to win the World Series? Initially, before the season started, to show you where I'm coming from, I said it would be a Minnesota Twin Washington National World Series. So that being said, take what I'm about to say with a huge grain of salt. So I am going to say that the World Series will be the Tampa Bay Rays against the Los Angeles Dodgers.
Oh, so the Andrew Friedman Bowl, right?
Andrew Friedman Bowl.
There you go. All right, we got to have bowl games. All right, go ahead, David.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of feel-good stories, in baseball in this pandemic-shortened season. I think, I just don't think there's any stopping the Yankees. I will say, well, if I had my way, I'd say Yankees and Slam Diego. I know we've been, riding the wave of, what San Diego's done this year with, Fernando Tatis Jr. and Machado out there. And of course, all the moves they made at the trade deadline. I really see a Yankees Dodgers series.
Oh, come on, quit waffling. Your name is Dave Hodges, not Brett Favre. Make up your mind, would you?
I'll say Los Angeles. I'll say the Dodgers finally get it this year. They get over the hump, and I think they lift the trophy.
Against who?
Against the Yankees.
Okay. You say
Tampa Bay is winning 1-0 in the third.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, all right. So there you go. So, all right. So, Stuart, let me have your prediction again. Oh, that's right. They're out, aren't they?
Yeah, the original one is out.
Yeah.
I figured I'd take a mulligan and try again.
Oh, well, come on. Hey, listen, you can do that. Remember, bear in mind, though, once upon a time, the Minnesota Twins originated in Washington before they ended up moving there. And I believe the Griffith family moved them over to. And I had the good pleasure many years ago of interviewing Calvin Griffith, when he was with the owned the team in the Detroit Tigers at Tiger Stadium. And the story that I got to tell you guys is I was trying to buy a ticket outside. Somebody took my money, and I was able to bump into a good friend that worked at the Highland House many years ago, loaned me some money. And I got the money and ended up buying another seat. And I sat next to Calvin Griffith. And as it turns out, I spent the whole day, Game 5 of the '87 ALCS, talking to Calvin Griffith. Wrote a story on it. Remember everything he said. And I got a thank you note somewhere from Calvin Griffith. It was a great thrill to be able to sit next to the owner of the Minnesota Twins. I understood they took his statue down in Minnesota for all the other inequities going on, but I don't care. Calvin Griffith to me will always have a special place in my heart. But I could see where the Washington-Minnesota connection was. He had two, Washington had just come off a win, and Minnesota, with Rocco Baldelli and that potent lineup, I could see where that would be a reasonable prediction. But
I thought the Washington pitching staff, normally if it would have been another 162-game season, I would have thought they would have struggled. But I thought going from 162 to a 60-game season that didn't start till the end of July, my reasoning was it would give those pitchers a chance to rest their arms and they'd come in fresh for a shorter season and be effective. But
Well, it doesn't matter. That's what this is all. This is 108 Stitches baseball talk for crying out. We're talking baseball. We're doing what the show is designed to do. Really? Okay. I mean, we had Karen Lombardi on the program, Stuart, and he kept saying that the Yankees are made out of glass, and probably for the good part of the season they were. They just have to make sure that they are made out of steel, and I have a feeling they're going to beat the Dodgers. And then you kind of wonder about the Dave Roberts thing, but why not go Yankees and Dodgers? How do I make a prediction and not go with it now? I got to stick with it, even though what you guys are saying is true. I mean, Tampa Bay could definitely be poised in a short series to go ahead and get there. I mean, Tampa Bay and the Dodgers is not unrealistic. Everybody would wonder that if you had the Yankees in San Diego, the only thing is you won't have Tony Gwynn hitting in the lineup for San Diego. So a lot of interesting matchups, how we go ahead and connect the dots. Get the Yankees and the Dodgers. Then we have the Yankees and the Padres. You got a little bit of history there. What can I tell you? And we even had a little Mets talk here for Stuart Hack. And he brings up Jay Horowitz. Oh, my goodness. What can I tell you? Doesn't get any better than that. Does it, fellas?
Does not.
Not at all.
All right. Well, with that said, since it doesn't get any better than that, David Hodges, I want you to go ahead and let everybody know how they get hold of you. Mr. Hack will follow suit, and then the Motor City Madmouth will wrap her up before we go ahead on to the Sports Exchange a little while with Steve Ballesteri. Go ahead, David.
Sure. I'm on Facebook at Dave Davino Hodges. Of course, Stuart, I know we're doing the broadcast for the first time tonight. The name Davino, I'm a huge soccer fan. Big fan of all the classic Brazilian teams, and so I figured I'd give myself a Brazilian soccer name. So that's where Davino comes from, since a lot of their nicknames are, a lot of these guys, I guess I maybe want to fashion themselves after singers and just have one name, that makes them. But yes, it's Dave Davino Hodges on Facebook, Davino, and I'm also on Twitter at Dave Talks Sports.
Go ahead, Stu.
Okay, so in my day job, I am the owner of Hack Tax and Accounting Services, a tax and accounting firm in Wellington, Florida. That's Palm Beach County. I can be reached when I'm not in the bubble doing tax returns on Facebook, Stuart A. Hack, which was the name my parents gave me, not because I was a fan of anything. I had no choice in the matter. Twitter, HackTax1. Of course, you can reach me by phone, 561-214-6171. Email Stuart at hacktaxandaccounting.com. Website, hacktaxandaccounting.com. And that's all I got. Take her away.
I will do that. Thank you very much, guys. Job well done for two guys that are being on the broadcast for the first time. I know how to pick my combinations, my goodness. And don't mind.
You do, Scott.
I don't mind advertising it either, by the way. All right. If you want to hear the audio version of 108 Stitches Baseball Talk, you can do so by Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. And if I talk too fast and talk too loud, so what? I'll do it again. Want to hear the audio version? Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. Now, in terms of following us, you can follow us on Twitter at Tribune South. That's the @ Tribune South. Facebook and Instagram, South Florida Tribune Gets It Done. YouTube channel, which you are watching this broadcast on, the South Florida Tribune YouTube channel. I encourage everybody out there to subscribe to it, and I'll give you 6 reasons why you should subscribe to it. The Sports Exchange is on there. No Limits is on there. 108 Stitches Baseball Talk, which is this. Real and Rare, Fantasy Football, and the South Florida Tribune Podcast. 2 of these broadcasts are mainly non-sports related, but we incorporate, we want to make sure that we have a variety of different things there. Our website's www.southfloridatribune.com. You'll find all of our content from the media distribution partners, as well as our columnists. We even have a section on there in the Motor City Monitor for our Detroit followers. I am from the Metro Detroit area. I like to promote sports in the area. And most of all, we have all of our broadcasts on there as well. You can email us at southfloridatribune@gmail.com. And, of course, you can connect with me on LinkedIn, Scott Morganroth. So, guys, it's been a pleasure having you on here. Certainly have a lot of baseball to talk about. And over the next couple of weeks while the playoffs are going, I expect us to continue talking baseball. I want to see us through the end of this baseball season. We've done pretty well. And I'm really happy that we're still talking about the baseball postseason, because at one point or another, when things got ugly early in late July and August, we weren't sure we were going to get to this point. But meanwhile, we're down to the Elite Eight. Any updates right now, Stuart Hack, on the Yankees Tampa Bay Ray game?
I know it was in the third inning. It was the top of the third, and let's see if the Yankees got out of it. Middle of the third, 1-0 Tampa Bay.
There you go. So when we have our report cards next week, okay, then we'll make sure we find out who is left. So meanwhile, just a little bit reminder to everybody out there, let's not kid yourself. This is COVID-19. Everybody needs to mask up. They need to utilize their common sense, do the social distancing necessary, and do everything you can to be preventive to keep yourself out of harm's way with COVID-19. The medical bills will get expensive, and the long-term effects of this virus will get even worse. So on behalf of Stuart Hack and David Hodges, my name is Scott Morgan, Roth the Motor City Madmouth. Thank you for joining us on this edition of 108 Stitches Baseball Talk. David will be back here on Monday with Rick Curdy. Stuart and I, well, we have a lot of work to do next week, and stay tuned for what Stuart and I will be cooking TBD. Meanwhile, I won't tell you this TBD. Have a great weekend, everybody. We'll catch you next week. Be safe. God bless. From the Florida Atlantic University Owls, it's a head of the night.